Hello,
But
everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Hear you
we
great.
can.
Good. You know, I was getting ready to introduce Vice Chair Sam Elliott, but he lost his mustache. What happened to you? You're muted.
My wife told me to get rid of it. So that's what
I'm
happened.
not getting any sound. Is this me?
That is you, Mr. Chairman.
How about now?
We hear
Can
you.
There
can
you
you
go.
hear us? We
All
can
right.
hear you, Mr. Chairman. Okay.
Yeah,
We can hear you.
Yeah, I got a new microphone, and you know, when you plug it in, it says plug and play, but that's not entirely true.
Oh,
You end up having to push some buttons and change some settings, but so long as you can hear me. Well, it's a pleasure to see everyone again. This is our little Hoover Commission hearing on financial scams, part 2. Good morning. I'm the chair of the Little Hoover Commission, and thank you all for joining us today. And Jana, that's a really gorgeous piece of art over your shoulder.
Oh, thank you.
No, I love these little peeks into everybody's lives. Let me introduce the other commissioners who are with us. We have Vice Chair Anthony Cannella, Commissioners Dion Aroner, David Byer, Jenna Sidley. Now, Gil Garcetti and Jose Hernandez may join us. They are traveling, but they're going to try to sign in from wherever they are. We've got Commissioner David Byer and Jan. Oh, I already did that. Now, we're also joined, I understand, at some point by Senator Roger Nilo. Also with us today are members of the commission staff, Executive Director Ethan Rarick, Deputy Executive Director Tamar Foster, Project Managers Crystal Beckham, Daniel Harris McCoy, and Analyst Gibran Maciel, and Sharon McAllister. Let's do a little bit of housekeeping. We're live streaming today's hearing and business meeting on Zoom. We'll have a public comment session at the end of the hearing. Members of the public joining us online are muted during the hearing. If you want to make public comment, please use the raised hand feature in Zoom by clicking on the hand icon to join the comment queue. Those joining by phone can dial #9 or *9 to raise their hand, or email us at littlehoover@lhc.ca.gov. Please indicate the phone number you're using to join the meeting so staff can identify and unmute you. Staff will be monitoring raised hands and comment requests throughout the hearing. If you're joining us in person in Sacramento and you want to make a public comment, please let one of our staff members know. As usual, public comment is limited to 3 minutes per speaker. We are recording this hearing. Afterwards, a permanent link to the video will be posted on our website and uploaded to our YouTube channel. Our business meeting will follow the conclusion of today's hearing. It is open to the public as well. At the business meeting, we plan to consider the commission's project and meeting schedule. Now let's talk about the substance of today's hearing. Today's hearing is the second in a series that will examine financial scams. At our first hearing last month, we learned how scammers are using various tools to defraud Californians of their savings and other financial assets. We heard from victims whose lives have been upended by these schemes, as well as experts working to raise awareness and advocate for more protections, local prosecutors working to financially restore victims and bring those involved in these crimes to justice, and representatives from several state agencies with a role in helping to fight these crimes. We learned that collaboration between government partners, but also relevant industry partners, will be essential to disrupting scammers and protecting Californians' hard-earned resources. Today's hearing will feature additional voices from those with a role in this fight. I do want to mention that in today's New York Times, there was a story headlined, "Americans have lost billions to online scams. How is that possible?" They cite the Treasury Department that Americans have lost more than $16.6 billion to an online scam industry, largely based in Southeast Asia. Scam centers rely on forced labor, and they proliferated during the pandemic. By some estimates, they take in at least $64 billion a year. So clearly, this is a significant issue. First, we'll hear from 2 experts who are working to raise awareness of these crimes and to protect Californians through policy reforms and civil litigation. Next, we will hear testimony from representatives from several of the industries, including banking, crypto, and telecommunications. with a key role in protecting consumers. They will discuss their work to protect consumers and opportunities to strengthen the state's response. I want to thank Commissioner Garcetti for leading this study and helping me with the topic. Today's hearing was organized by Deputy Executive Director Tamar Foster. Now, before she introduces the witnesses, I want to let them know that commissioners, in my experience, they read your material. They are familiar somewhat with the issue. They are going to have questions and comments with respect to what the witnesses have to say. But in all likelihood, you'll probably be interrupted. Please take that interruption as a compliment. It is indicative of the commissioner's interest and their work to better understand this particular topic. Now, let me turn it over to Tamar, if you would be so kind to introduce our first witness.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Our first witness this morning is Donata Bohanec. She's the Executive Director of the California Elder Justice Coalition. Previously, she was the Elder Justice Coordinator at the nonprofit Senior Advocacy Services, where she led Sonoma County's Elder Justice Initiative. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Let's see, is she on? Shara?
I am in the process of promoting Donna.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Oh, so that's what they call it, promoting? Right? Every discipline has their terms.
That is correct, Mr. Chairman. So we will, apologies for the delay. Here she is. So Ms. Bohanec, please go ahead.
I'm just checking to see. Okay, great. I'm visible. Thank you so much. All right. Good morning, Chair Nava, commissioners, and the audience on Zoom today. It's an honor to be here on behalf of the California Elder Justice Coalition about the actions that our state can take to stop the devastating loss Californians experience each day from this transnational fraud and elder financial exploitation. As Chair Nava, you've already mentioned this morning, we have heard extensively about the complexity of this crime and the impact on our older adults and the incredible amounts lost in our state that are really stolen, and that number is increasing exponentially each year. And I'm not here to shed further light on the dynamics at play or why this crime continues in our state, but I'm here to talk about some of the solutions that we have proposed as the California Elder Justice Coalition to turn this tide around and, most importantly, to support the victims in our state. I'm also here as an advocate. I'm here as an advocate for older and disabled adults who are retired or living on fixed incomes, who, as victims of these crimes, often have far too much to lose, and to advocate for bolder steps and increased protections that can respond to this devastating loss from these financial crimes. I have submitted written comments and recommendations that I hope and I appreciate if you've taken a moment to look at. But for the little time I have here this morning, I'd actually like to just paint a picture that might color your thoughts for the rest of this hearing today, to think about what it might look like if we were living in an alternate reality where on a daily basis, our elders were walking into branches or credit unions across our state with someone stuck close to their side, offering to help them access their funds. Maybe it's a new friend, maybe it's a contractor. They're there to help an elder get access to their money, to pay for a remodel, or to help them with their daily tasks, or help them as they age here in California. And that person knows exactly what questions a bank teller might ask. They know how to answer the questions to make sure that that older adult can access their funds. Now, that would be a questionable situation even in the best moments. But if that person were walking into a branch with a weapon, a gun or a knife to the throat, the emergency protocols that would be in place to stop these crimes would be quick, it would be swift, there would be a police response, and we would all be working to help that elder get to safety. The reason why I bring up this picture and call it an alternate reality is because the urgency needed in the moment when these crimes are taking place is just as severe as when a weapon is up against an elder's throat. It isn't a gun or a knife, but it is a cell phone. And the threat that an elder feels in that moment is just as real and just as severe. And I offer this picture today to carry through all of the testimony that you might listen to and to think about where the mechanisms are that we can be putting into place now. Where can we stop the transactions mid-process to halt the dollars from leaving the accounts that support this transnational crime from happening in the first place? And where are the solutions that we haven't fully tried yet? While I've outlined recommendations in the written comments, I'm actually eager to sit down with the partners here today and talk about what solutions could work in our state. And what I really want to emphasize is that this opportunity that the Little Hoover Commission has offered us as advocates and as professionals in the field is the opportunity for collaboration. We heard about the model in San Diego that was a successful model at an elder fraud task force. Models like that we need to replicate across the state, especially in communities that don't have the same resources as a large urban area, that we have to collaborate. Oh, yes.
I'm going to interrupt you. I apologize, but I told you this was predictable. Commissioner Beyer has a question.
Thank you for your testimony, and thank you for the testimony of all the witnesses today. I'm especially impressed by the contrast between the assumptions I think many of us made before our first hearing about the nature of the scams and the sophistication of the perpetrators. We heard in the first day very emotionally compelling stories about people who've been taken advantage of. And I think many of us, including myself, assumed it was in part the naivete of the people who had been victimized. Clearly, that's wrong. And what you're pointing to is a degree of sophistication that later witnesses will also comment on. What I want to do is expand the conversation a little bit to the application of artificial intelligence and use of chatbots to further scams. Michael Connelly, the famous author, has a new book out called The Proving Ground. It's a chatbot who convinces a teenage boy to kill someone. That's not the point that I'm trying to make here, but rather that chatbots can be programmed to deal with the emotional vulnerability of its victims. And just like teenagers have particular predilections, people who are elderly may fall victim to a particular kind of psychological manipulation. Have you seen any of this activity in California? And then my second question is it realistic to expect a single state to be able to thwart this transnational, multinational scamming industry when it's going to require both federal and international cooperation?
Thank you, Commissioner Beyer. Am I responding to that?
Yes, please.
Okay, great. So obviously the last point that you make about the transnational national efforts, that is in an entirely different playing field. Your question about AI bots, in my experience and what I've observed, certainly with the financial scams that we have, had victims bring to our attention, that element is often in the initial stages of contact, that it is, these relationships are often carried over the course of months and with much more sophisticated psychological techniques being used that is above and beyond what the concern AI or a chatbot would bring to this issue. That a lot of times when a person is actually withdrawing their life savings, mortgaging their home, feeding their entire life savings into a crypto machine, those types of examples, that is a much deeper engagement than an AI situation. And I do not have personal knowledge about how AI or some of the industry experts in that area are looking for ways to protect individuals in those senses, but I certainly think that, I know that that's some of the efforts of our regulatory infrastructure from the federal level has been emphasizing how we can do more in that area. But really the psychological tactics are on the individual basis, and that there's a person who's, feigning a relationship, who's getting the older or any adult to act in a certain way and literally feeding the answers through a cell phone, in the withdrawal of those funds that I'm speaking to today.
Okay, so related, to what extent are the victims being driven towards the use of crypto as opposed to regular bank accounts? Because crypto is substantially less regulated, particularly in the United States, in contrast to other countries. And so the widespread availability and the lack of safeguards on crypto transfers seems to be a factor here. It's sort of like we're asking law enforcement and people like you to bail out a boat with a sieve.
Certainly in California, we're fortunate where we passed the law that limited the amount of funds that could be placed in a crypto ATM machine in a single transaction. And that has actually shifted the loss from crypto machines, the ATM machines, to what Deputy DA Perello mentioned last week, which was purchasing gold bars and utilizing couriers to actually use the funds to take them out of the country. And so while crypto was a huge on an upswing a couple of years back, in California, we've actually put some protections in place, but the crimes still persist and the transnational networks still persist. And those crimes are often in the FBI's territory for jurisdiction. But when the person is withdrawing the funds in that moment, that's where I'm speaking to the possible stopping mechanisms that could keep a person from even withdrawing their funds in the first place, where that they could then go and buy gold bars and have a courier come pick it up, and then they would lose their life savings that way. So that's where the model that San Diego presented really is effective, because when they crack down on that courier system, even on a regional basis across the Southern California area like they did, then it pushes those criminals acting further outside of those jurisdictions, but we can still do more in the state to keep them from spreading even further, which they are doing. They're coming up to the Bay Area, they're going to other areas of the state and beyond. So it changes whether it's crypto, whether it's gold, but the act of removing those funds from the victim's account is where we need to put a stop to.
Thank you.
Now, before I call on Vice Chair Canola, I see that Commissioner Garcetti has joined us. What can you tell us about your location, if you're willing to? You unmute yourself. You're muted. Gil, you're muted.
Okay. I'm on the Silk Road Trail, and it's exactly 12 hours later here than there. But I'm glad I'm here. Thank you.
No, thank you. I think it speaks to the dedication of the commissioners that they log in from a location that's 12 hours different in the time frame. Vice Chair Cannella.
Yes, thank you. I recently had somebody that I know very well get scammed, and it was a gold bar thing. And when this person was telling me and walking me through this, they thought they were part of this plan to stop Russian whatever. I just was shocked. I couldn't believe when they were telling me this. I was so shocked. And so this person went to, and this person's a smart person. I mean, if it can happen to this person, it can happen to anybody. But he went to law enforcement. This person impersonated a federal, employee. And so he went to the FBI, and they basically just shrugged and yawned. And it was a lot of money, and they just didn't care, frankly. And then they went to local law enforcement, and they were sympathetic, but there was really zero effort to do anything, zero. And so is that your experience as well? Is that what you're seeing when law enforcement is informed? They just kind of shrug and yawn and say, you're tough luck?
Yeah, I think it can be very frustrating because law enforcement is equally in a tough position where they also recognize that this is happening on such a rampant basis and that they don't have the tools in their toolkit to actually pursue these criminals. However, just to note that if you were to have invited the FBI to come speak on this issue, they give a lot of outreach presentations on the subject far and wide, because they do have the rapid response mechanism that can stop a transaction through bank accounts within 72 hours. Hopefully within 24 hours is the goal. But they actually have limitations. Like recent presentations I've heard from them is they don't even pursue if it isn't over $1 million. And so the kind of loss that you're talking about and the kind of tools, again, if we think of where the funds are actually being pulled in the first place, is where we have to put the Band-Aid. When law enforcement is being, informed, or where someone's trying to report the crime, that action has already taken place and their hands are already tied in the sense of what they can do to pursue the crime. And that's why
there was a courier involved, and this person thought they still had this other person on the hook.
That he still
could have done something, right? But
they could have.
So it's just $1 million, $100,000 to an average person is worth $10 million to a multi-person, right? So
yeah,
it's unfortunate that there doesn't seem to be much concern. And then even tax write-offs, the government got rid of that. So it's just really these elderly people, it's just your tough luck, or whoever gets scammed, not just elderly people.
Yeah, I think that's where the idea that the multidisciplinary teams, when they are in place, and we have, for example, Adult Protective Services working closely with the property crimes investigators, and we kind of have people on speed dial, that system can be a lot faster in terms of getting the right person at a police department to take the action that they can in that moment, especially if it does involve a crime that they can pursue locally. And I think that's where this idea of a network isn't just, for example, some of our cities have a neighboring town might be a very small police department, and then the next biggest city might have a full, property crimes investigative unit, but a small law enforcement agency might only have one person that you're reporting to, and they're out on a call right now. And so it really varies depending on where the person is going to report. And that's why having a multidisciplinary, like regional effort where the people know exactly what to do in the moment when that crime is, like you said, still fresh enough to take action. I think that's where we as a state in California really have the opportunity to take what we've been succeeding at in more urban environments and bring them to some of our smaller jurisdictions, bring them to the places that might be shrugging their shoulders and saying, hey, we don't really know what to do. And I know when you had Erin West last hearing, that has been her work with Operation Shamrock, is how to train law enforcement. She started a whole collaboration across this nation to train law enforcement, it's particularly in these tactics, so that they are more successful at it.
Well, just to echo Dave's comment, before this happened to somebody that I know, I just thought people were naive. How could you fall for it? But I have a whole different attitude towards it now. So,
in addition, it sounds like the person that understands what happened. We obviously see people who do this over and over again, and with add in some cognitive, mild cognitive impairment, next thing you know, they're giving away $30,000 every day, every other day. And we've also seen examples where, family members have tried to stop those transactions also, and the person keeps repeating it. And that's where some of these solutions that I put in the written comments could come into play, is to support an older or dependent adult so that the loss doesn't continue, even if it happens.
Yeah. Thank you.
One circumstance. Yeah. Thank you.
Well, I warned you that we would interrupt you, but I do, we've seen your written remarks, but I think for the benefit of the audience who may not have seen it, would you be willing to do like a brief summary of the recommendations that you've set out? So I just think I'd like for you to be able to do that.
Sure. Well, a lot of what I had to prepare for the comments today was to really emphasize the need for collaboration, because I think this is the opportunity at hand. I've mentioned how the multidisciplinary efforts like what San Diego has put in place can really succeed, and that has to be broadened beyond a county line or a city line, so that these networks, the response is actually coordinated across a variety of entities. I also mentioned in the recommendations that that we do not have supports for these financial crimes when someone does fall victim, that our victim compensation board doesn't support older adults in applying for any type of services when they do fall victim to these crimes, and that is a huge gap, that we could actually be looking at the efforts that our these state agencies have been trying to put in place, and do just a little bit more to collaborate around how we're actually getting into the local communities to support people when they're experiencing this devastating loss. And so the other recommendations that we included have to do with training frontline staff in the financial institutions, that oftentimes someone has to make a decision in the moment, and a lot of times with the thought of that a crime is taking place, it really relies on a person's instinct to say, hey, this doesn't feel right. What can I do in this moment to help this person? And, when you're in a customer service role, that's a conflicting sensation. I want to help the person. I want to do what they're asking of me. But now I also have this, kind of sense in the back of my neck saying this isn't right, and this person needs more support. But in that moment, they don't have the tools to actually take action the way that they would need to. And so in some of the solutions that we proposed have to do with how you would refer somebody so that they can get support. Unfortunately, with this type of crime, especially when it's affecting older adults, the solution is hand-holding, is having another person to talk to in that moment to help them break away from that cell phone interaction, to break away from the scam's effect on their brain. When I give presentations out in the community about this subject, I talk about a light switch in your brain that has gone off because the scammer has set the fear part of your brain in motion. And until you flip the switch back to the reasoning portion that's saying, hey, I don't want to withdraw my life savings and give it to this person, it takes a human touch to actually get them back into that reasoning portion of their brain when they've already been flipped over with that scam call. And so any of the solutions really have to talk about that moment. Whenever the dollars are being withdrawn from the account, the scammers, they send out all this, fear-based, your Amazon account has been hacked. And the example I give is, well, I don't put dollars in my Amazon account. but it makes you click on something. It makes you say, oh, well, what is that? Oh, I don't want that to be hacked. We have to really look at where the dollars are and stop the transaction at that point. And I recognize that the financial institutions are regulated on a level that's past our state level, but there are mechanisms that we could be putting in place here in California that could work towards that. So I know that was the gist of what I wanted to bring today. I do think that it's a more full conversation around how to support victims and to stop the loss from happening in the first place. Those were the main points I wanted to get to today. Were there other recommendations, Chair Nava, that you wanted me to highlight while I'm on the line here?
No, I just wanted you to identify, because I thought they were very succinct and based on your experience and what it is that you know about people in that situation and what kind of help that they need. And I see that Commissioner Garcetti has his hand up.
I do. You finished where I would have started when you said, to prevent these from happening right at the beginning. That's where I am starting, because as a former prosecutor, I know how difficult these cases are to put together, to potentially prosecute. But since many of the people behind it are out of the country, we don't have jurisdiction for it. However, what San Diego has done has been exemplary. I mean, every DA's office, either alone or with other DA offices, should get together and mirror what they have done. Because if there are couriers or people that we can grab a hold of and criminally prosecute and maybe go up the chain a little bit, that's what we should be doing. So I think that's where you are too, but I just want to emphasize that fact from my viewpoint. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Garcetti. So looking to commissioners, do I see any other questions or comments, raised hands? See none, but I do think that your testimony has had an impact. Really appreciate the material that you submitted. And as I said, it's important for us to hear from people like you who have hands-on and who have spent time with people who have been victimized by this. And as the commissioner gets more information, our understanding of it gets a little more profound every time. And you've been very helpful with that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Garcetti's up again.
Yeah, one quick question before you leave. When I was a young prosecutor, and that was many years ago, and I dealt with fraud victims, they are believers. They don't want to believe they've been defrauded by that individual. And you focus on that a tiny bit. Have you found a way to perhaps convince them that they are being defrauded? I mean, I remember personally handling a case where I had victims and they were under subpoena and they didn't want to testify because this is a company that's going to make me rich, et cetera, et cetera. So have you had any experience that might be helpful to for you to share that with us?
Yes, certainly. I mean, we absolutely, that is what you see in the moment. Your example brought up, where money muling takes place in local communities, and an older adult might be moving funds, for another transaction. And that is certainly key. And I know that when the FBI speaks about this issue, that is part of it. When I mentioned the handholding that's needed for in-person support, there aren't a lot of services on the ground where someone can go and talk to somebody when they're in the midst of that. And when you say, the person is under the spell, well, would you want to admit it to, other people? Would you want to say, oh yeah, that was silly of me. Like, when you think of the psychology behind it, right, they need to be in a position where they can actually unwind where that hook has come in and successfully gotten them to take action. And that's why, the emphasis on the local services, when you mentioned, what you saw as a prosecutor, we really need to be having services available, like on the ground, to support people in the moment so that they can then take the actions that would protect themselves from further loss. Because the other thing that we see is when someone has fallen victim, oftentimes they're not willing to share with their family or to actually take action in the moment the first time, and that loss continues. And so the other piece is that even if we miss it the very first time, there's going to be a second and third time potentially that we would
Sure.
also want these protections in place. And a lot of times when Adult Protective Services is responding and calling a bank and saying, hey, this is a vulnerable adult, they're, you know, they fit the code requirements for further protection. We need to stop these transactions from leaving their bank account. And if they don't have a willing partner on the other end of the line to help, you know, work together, that's where the multidisciplinary team of professionals is needed, and the direct, you know, services to help someone in the moment in the communities that we serve here in California. That's what's needed.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Tamar.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Bohannick. Appreciate your testimony today. Next, I'd like to call up Anne Marie Murphy. She is principal at Cotchett, Pitre, McCarthy, where she practices civil litigation, focusing on class actions, consumer rights, and elder abuse litigation, among other fields. She also serves on the board of directors of Consumer Attorneys of California, their executive committee, and she is here on their behalf today. Thank you for joining us, Ms. Murphy.
Thank you for having me today. Again, my name is Anne Marie Murphy. I'm a partner at Cotchett, Pitre, and McCarthy. I have a broad legal practice that involves representing consumers and government entities. A portion of my practice is devoted to representing Californian elders in all types of elder abuse situations, including neglect and physical abuse, and also including financial abuse. A portion of that practice focuses on representing elders who are scam victims. I offer my testimony today on behalf of Consumer Attorneys of California. CAOC is a professional organization that represents the interests of 39 million Californian consumers. Our attorneys and their clients face opponents every day with far more resources. We, as members of CAOC, seek to level the playing field for consumers in California. Our elder abuse practice stems from California's ADACPA, which is the Elder Abuse and Dependent Adult Civil Protection Act, which is found in Welfare and Institutions Code, section 15600 in sequence. Most notably for today, ADACPA includes liability for those who assist in financial elder abuse. I want to go over briefly the current challenges in this area of practice. But first, let me highlight that in enacting ADACPA, the legislature included an expression of its legislative intent in the preamble, and it noted that elder abuse cases are seldom prosecuted as criminal matters, and that few civil cases are brought in connection with abuse due to problems of proof, court delay, and the lack of incentives to prosecute the cases. And that it was important to the legislature that there be a mechanism to better enable civil litigation. I want to go over a bit about the civil practice and the civil assisting cases. I like to point out that there are 4 parties to an elder financial scam. First, there is the elder, the senior, who clearly doesn't want to lose their life savings. They don't understand that they're being scammed. Second, you have the scam artist who, as the commission has heard, is often part of organized crime overseas. That has to be left up to the governments and law enforcement to go after the scam artist. Third, there's going to be some type of a communication platform that allows the scammer overseas to contact the senior in California. And fourth, which is what I focus on, is there has to be a financial institution involved because we're talking about financial scams. So there's going to be a bank, a brokerage firm, or a crypto company of some type. And from a public policy standpoint, we need to think about what we can do to incentivize the financial services industry to do more to protect elderly scam victims and consumers in general. And as the commission has heard, it takes liability for there to be incentive to prevent customers from being scammed. I only take cases where I think at the end of the day, I can get before a trier of fact and convince that trier of fact that a financial institution should fairly be held responsible in whole or in part for making the scam victim whole. And that's a high bar. I estimate that my firm takes about only 1% of the scam cases that we're contacted about because these cases are so resource intensive and so difficult. They've always been difficult, but they become very difficult in recent years for reasons that are laid out in my full testimony and the supporting documents. In 2008, Senator Darrell Steinberg introduced a bill, SB 1140, which was passed and expanded liability and changed the wording of our financial elder abuse portions of ADACPA. After that legislation was passed, it was the understanding of those practicing in this area that the standard was that you could hold somebody who assists in financial elder abuse, facilitates the scam, responsible if they either knew or should have known that they were assisting a scam. And that's where all the fight is over the should have known standard. I've included in my materials as attachment 1 a former Senator Steinberg's letter where he talks about the legislative intent with the 2008 legislation. I will tell you that early on when the statute was amended, I and other consumer attorneys could sometimes recover all or large portions of an elder's losses. And again, only in the strongest of factual situations. Unfortunately, in the intervening years, the companies, particularly banks, have started taking state court cases and removing them to federal court because there's been a split in interpretation of the statute between state court judges who see that the statute's a remedial consumer protection statute and that the standard should be new or should have known. And the federal courts, which at this point, consumer attorneys like I myself have lost the argument over that standard. And the federal court judges are reading into the statute a requirement that a plaintiff has to show that a bank actually 100% knew it was helping a scam, which is, I would suggest, not the intent of the statute. And it's a bar that's near impossible for a senior to meet, particularly when they're facing a motion to dismiss by a bank and they haven't even had discovery yet. So very merit-based cases are regularly being dismissed from our federal courts. I've included in the materials some examples with some facts of the type of cases, the type of seniors that I represent. I can answer questions about those if the commissioners have questions. As a member at CAOC, I had a front row seat to the SB 278 legislative effort. And I do want to comment briefly on that effort. It started off as a very simple, I think, elegant attempt to just clarify the law so that it was clear that the standard was whether a company knew or should have known that there was a financial scam. Unfortunately, over the 2 years of legislative work on that bill, it got heavily amended. The banking lobby fought very hard, and the bill looked very different at the end of the day. I've included in my materials Governor Newsom's veto message. I will say I think I understand what's behind that message. One of the problems is that there is an issue of federal preemption under the National Bank Act. The legislature is limited in what it can do. That legislation that focuses on telling banks, what nationally registered banks, what they can do. So when we started SB 278, it was just a clarification of the law, and it would apply to anybody, any person or any company that assisted in a financial scam. At the end of the day, the bill was very focused on banks and financial institutions.
Ms. Murphy, I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt you.
Yes.
Commissioner Sidley has her hand up.
Yeah. Thank you. And thank you, Ms. Murphy, for your testimony. I am just curious. I know that you're focused on elder abuse, seniors, but the two women who testified before us at the last hearing, I mean, they didn't look like, they aren't seniors to me. So these scams are actually impacting everybody, young people, middle-aged, senior. And I'm curious how we reconcile the protections for people of these scams and people who want to go to the bank and get their money. And, you know, I'm concerned about that balance, and someone going into the bank and the bank says, you have to wait forever, basically, because I don't know that this transaction is real. And I'm exaggerating by saying wait forever, but you know, there are times when you have to move large amounts of money to pay bills, to pay taxes, things like that. And so there'd be an impact if they can't move that money. And so specifically, I'm just wondering your thoughts on how do we reconcile that balance of needing access to your funds and being protective of those who may be trying to misuse your funds? Because, and again, these scams now are reaching the entire universe of people who transact money moving. So I'm really interested in that balance and your thoughts on that.
Yes, no, that's a good question. It's one those are issues that I care about, both as an attorney and as a consumer myself. I think it's interesting if you look at the system that we have for credit cards. The issuer of the credit card is in fact liable for fraud, and that's why we all have had the experience of being abroad or at an airport and having a transaction declined. It's because there is liability, and then there's an incentive to prevent fraud. But unfortunately, there isn't that same incentive to prevent these large amounts of money that are being wired out of Californians' accounts. I agree with you, absolutely. The scams are targeting people of all ages. It's just that when we talk about elders, they're a disadvantaged protected class per our ADACPA's introduction that needs special protections. Also, I'll point out that the seniors that I represent, they tend to be, they're in their 80s, they're in their 90s. There's no way that they can go back into the workforce and recover the money that they've lost to the scams. So I fully support these efforts to help all consumers. But I think special consideration in the past has been given to elders and should continue to be given to elders. When SB 278 was pending, I would characterize the banking lobby's reaction to that effort as the sky is falling. We're going to have to unbank all seniors, and I don't think that's correct. And I represented seniors after the earlier legislative amendment, when most people viewed the world as it was liability attached if there somebody knew or should have known. And the sky didn't fall. There wasn't a huge rush of a ton of cases. And the reason is because with even the should have known standard, that is a tough standard still. I mean, it takes a lot of hours of effort and work and discovery to work up your case in a civil case even with that standard. So
you've used this example of the credit cards, and to a novice, I mean, my mind is that there's a lag period in the time that I transact and I bought my pair of shoes, and then my 30 days later I pay the bill or something. That doesn't exist if somebody walks into a bank and says, I need my money on demand. I need my money right now. So it is the answer, and I'm posing that, is the answer to, if you want that benefit of the credit card type of transaction, do we try to lobby and change banking rules so that the on demand is now going to be delayed? And And is that an overreaction, or is that the reaction that we need because these scams and these scammers are taking so much money? I ask that as a question. I don't know the answer here. I know that every story, I don't care if you're 80 or if you're 20, every story where you've lost all this money is horrifying. And these criminals are horrible. But I'm just trying, again, I come back to what is the balance of on demand, I walk into a bank on demand, I want my money, versus waiting a period of time to be able to sort that out and make sure that you don't end up with nothing.
Well, so I focus my attention on what the situation looks like to a financial institution. So an example of somebody coming in, whether they're 20 or 90, and for the first, doing one wire, probably that's not, that the institution should have known that was a scam. The reason why the should have known standard is a good solution is because it strikes that balance of not saying that you can never wire money, because there's always going to be liability with something that it is still a high bar. I believe that financial institutions are very sophisticated, and I'm not a banking expert, but we know generally that they are tasked with preventing why they're tasked with preventing criminal activity at some level, or moving money for drug laundering or whatnot. And I believe that they can and they need to do better by consumers and by seniors. And sometimes, yes, that is saying no to a transaction. And a lot of the times
they do currently report. I mean, if you take out $10,000, there's a report that's required.
Yeah.
What happens to that report? Does it go into a black hole?
I'm not the expert on that. And I also, in our civil litigation, we don't get discovery into those reports. Just so you know, it doesn't. I can't comment on the type of black hole that exists. Sorry.
Okay, just curious. Sorry, didn't mean to put you on the spot. Just
no, of course.
All of this. Okay, thanks. I'm done.
Thank you. Commissioner Byer has his hand up, but before I call on him, you've made reference to, and I think we're going to hear from a banking representative in a little bit, but the issue of should have known then becomes a question of fact for the jury, does it not?
Yes. Correct. Yes.
Okay. Can you give us, based on your experience, what it is that you have seen or offered as evidence in order to support the threshold issue of should have known?
Sure. So we would analyze the consumer, the elder's past banking practices with that institution. Often our clients are the little old lady who is relying on Social Security money, and just all you see in her account or his account is a few $1,000s of transactions a month. Then you see large hundreds of thousands of dollars being moved into the account and then wired out, often wired overseas. So that's the type of evidence that we pull together. We also work with expert witnesses who, from a banking industry perspective, will talk about what the bank should have, when the bank should have been on knowing that there was an apparent scam. But yeah, we're looking at things from the banker's standpoint. We're also looking at, and we're developing evidence of what happened when the senior went into the branch to wire the money. What was said to them? What did the senior say to the teller? Now, of course, as we've heard, the scam victims are heavily coached. Oftentimes, they'll have an open line on their cell phone in their pocket to the scam artist who wants to hear everything that goes on. But what was said and what was done is important. I hope that answers your question.
All right. So in part, you're relying on custom and practice.
Yes.
Custom and practice of ordinary banking activity by a particular individual. And when there is, and in quotes, a deviation from that custom and practice, then the notion is that then gets elevated to a should have known.
Correct. Right. And I would point out that the brokerage industry has started a number of years ago a trusted contact process where seniors can add usually a family member as a trusted contact that in theory the brokerage firm could reach out to. Sometimes in banking, there is another like a child on an account, and what we don't see is the reach out to that other account holder. I think that a lot could be done to improve and prevent scams in that respect.
Thank you. Commissioner Byer?
Thank you for your testimony. I want to make a distinction between banks who try to do the right thing and other actors. So I'm assuming that you have some banks who are more cooperative, have better standard practices, versus others in the, let's say, less regulated crypto sector. And I would be remiss if I didn't note that today a pardon was issued to a person who pled guilty for crypto money laundering involving human trafficking and other offenses. President Trump pardoned that person today. That company has a business deal with a company actively involved with his children. So the idea that we're going to crack down on fraud when we're granting pardons to crypto criminals, it strikes me as absurd. And we ought to be focused on that in addition to trying to get the best practices from banks in the United States. My question really relates to which banks, if any, do you think do a better job of preventing financial scams?
Oh, that's a tough question. And I just would have anecdotal thoughts about. I think each of the big five, the large banks are trying to. They say they're trying to protect seniors and customers. They're just not doing enough. And
so let me interrupt there.
Yeah.
So in the ordinary financial world, there's a know your customer requirement.
Yeah.
Do they all use that system?
No, not that I'm aware of. You can ask the Chase representative who's next, but no, I mean, that's a concept I see in the brokerage industry is a know your customer standard.
It applies to wire transfers, for example, bank wire transfers.
Mhm.
You have to have met a know your customer standard. And are there other limits that, in your knowledge, applied by other countries who have more sophisticated practices, Australia and other countries, where they have put limitations on banks to prevent scams?
Yes, I just out of curiosity, because I care about this issue, I have tried to pay a little attention to what others are doing. In the UK in particular, there's been laws passed. I would characterize it more as a strict liability system, which isn't even the ask here. It's not. I'm not here to ask for strict liability, although that is one very viable approach that can protect people. But there's my understanding in the UK is that the financial institutions have to pay for wire scams up to a certain dollar threshold. Not that I'm an expert at all in other countries' laws.
If you ask artificial intelligence application, you'll get a pretty good answer. Mm-hmm. Trust me, I've done that.
Okay.
And there are a bunch of other countries that have used a lot of other tools. Mm-hmm. And it gets back to my point that the state of California may have done what it can, but may not be have jurisdiction to do enough to make a material dent in a transnational application. And it's not just federal laws, it's federal trade practices, because the countries that are perpetrating or they're home to the criminal organizations here are predominantly Southeast Asia, including China, India, Myanmar, Cambodia, and Laos. And we have trade relationships and we have trade negotiations with them. And putting this on the trade agenda seems like a pretty good idea to me.
Oh, I totally agree. But what I'm saying is that there is a small step that can be done by the California legislature. And I think the best thing to do is not to have it be limited to trying to regulate just banks, because that's not what's needed. But rather, clarifying the law that you have assisting liability when a person or entity knew or should have known that it was assisting in a scam.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have a question. I want to welcome Commissioner Hernandez. Good to see you. Are you aware of these kinds of losses, whether or not they're covered by insurance? So if you're a financial institution and it's been determined that you have, violated the standard and are therefore liable for a payout to, your customer, is there insurance that is available to underwrite those costs, or does it come out of whatever funds the bank has available?
I think ultimately that's a question for the banking representative. As a civil attorney, I see that normally there's typically business insurance absent the business committee. There can be fraud exclusions.
Right. If you engage in intentional bad conduct, then you're
Right.
not likely to be covered by insurance.
Exactly.
But if it's a negligent, right? If it's a negligent determination that you have released the funds when you shouldn't have, that might be a separate question.
Yeah.
Fine. We'll ask the next witness. All right. Do I have any other questions or comments from commissioners? Seeing none. I want to thank you, Ms. Murphy, for your testimony.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Okay.
Thanks, Tamar.
Thank you, Ms. Murphy. Our next witness is Darius Kingsley. He's Managing Director and Head of Consumer Banking Practices at JPMorgan Chase. Previously, he served as Chief Housing Policy Advisor in the Office of Financial Stability and Senior Counsel in the U.S. Department of Treasury. Thank you so much, Mr. Kingsley.
Okay, thank you. I was caught in the circle of you're being promoted. I hope you all can hear me now. Great, thank you.
Looks like you made it.
Excellent, thank you so much. So commissioners of the Little Hoover Commission, my name is Darius Kingsley. I'm the head of consumer banking practices at Chase, where I'm the owner of the elder and vulnerable customer segment across the whole firm, focusing on the elder customer experience as they bank with us, and also for branch scams, where I focus on customers who are already in the middle of a scam, and as those victims engage with our bankers and our advisors in our branches. I'd like to thank you for hosting this important conversation today. That's very important to us. It's important to me personally because of my own ties to California. My elder father lives out there, as does my college daughter. I'm a former California resident myself. At Chase, customer protection is a top priority. Fraud and scams have long been a societal problem and a consistent public and governmental concern in this country. And while criminals have now fully embraced modern technology, their core intent is still to exploit and deceive. That remains unchanged. They sell non-existent products on social media, perpetuate romance scams on dating sites, spoof legitimate businesses and trusted institutions' phone numbers on caller IDs like Chase's own number, and then they use all available payment methods, wires, cash, crypto ATMs, etc., to steal people's money. American banks have aggressively responded to this challenge. At Chase, we've increased security measures and risk protocols to protect consumers and combat financial fraud. Each year across our firm and around the world, Chase proactively identifies threats, stopping more than $12 billion in fraud attempts last year. We've achieved that success through significant investments in fraud and scam detection and prevention capabilities, and by expanding the teams that do this important work. We employ sophisticated security tools, including 24/7 fraud monitoring, data encryption, and secure technology like biometric authentication to safeguard our customers' money and ensure authorized access to their accounts. These efforts focus on a very simple truth, which is that the best way to protect customers from fraud and scams is to prevent criminals from carrying out their schemes in the first place. It's to stop the scam before the victim shows up in a branch and before they try to make a payment or withdraw funds. It's a societal problem, and it deserves a national, aggressive, and coordinated response. We've begun conversations with other stakeholders to develop real and effective solutions that will stop these crimes at the source. and bring justice to victims. We must acknowledge that banks alone cannot stop financial crimes that are conceived of and largely executed beyond the boundaries of financial institutions, so that all stakeholders across government, law enforcement, and public and private industry must work together. The issues are complex and they're global. Fraud and scams are also affecting customers of all ages and walks of life, as I heard just earlier on this call. While a lot of the attention has been focused on the elder victims of scams for understandable reasons, the fact is that the younger generations are equally susceptible, with as many younger victims as older. Ultimately, though, the true scale of the scams is unknown because many victims understandably feel shame and don't report it.
Mr. Kingsley, I apologize. I'm going to interrupt you. Consider it a compliment, Commissioner Sidley.
So, hi, good morning. Thank you for your testimony. Quick question. I'm going to ask you the same question that I asked the other witness, and that is, my understanding is if you make numerous withdrawals, $10,000 or more, there's a report. What happens to that report? Where does it go? Who sees it, and how is it used, and can it be used somehow to protect against these frauds?
That's right. So we filed, there's a couple different kinds of reports that you're referring to. The $10,000 one is a currency transaction report. There's also separately, we might file it at the same time or maybe independently, a SAR, suspicious activity report. These go up to FinCEN and to the Treasury Department. They have access, as do all federal law enforcement agencies. We know that they use them. We don't know on any particular SAR or CTR what happens to them once we submit them. Sometimes, most cases, we never hear back. However, sometimes we do. Federal law enforcement, the FBI, will sometimes reach out to us having observed a pattern or identified a wrongdoer based on the SARs or CTRs that we or other banks have filed. And so we can see that behind the scenes, they're often connecting the dots. The true scale.
So they may take this information, and it's a $10,000 or more wire, and they can see the account that you wired, and presuming that somebody's actually looking at these documents or feeding them into AI, who can say, oh, look, there's a wire and there's a wire, and and they're coming from all these different, they may say, don't wire to this account anymore, or stop and talk to this person. So that could happen, but you're not really at this point seeing that. It's more looking for drug dealers and things like that. Is that
they usually, that's correct. They usually use them, in our experience, to go after money mules and the large scale scammer networks.
Okay. I mean, because it's a tool that's already in place. And I'm is it being used properly? I don't know. And, and not that the little Hoover Commission can tell the U.S. Department of Treasury at this point to use their tools differently. I mean, they're using their tools to tear down the White House, which makes me want to cry. So, all right, I'll stop musing. Go ahead.
But before I continue, I will just add on that, we have very good relationships, obviously, with the FBI and other federal law enforcement agencies. We have our own global security department that talks to them all the time. We have heard that federal law enforcement is, as you can imagine, understaffed, and their priorities right now, in many cases, are elsewhere. There are, I think, a lot of really great people at the federal level who want to work on this and want to engage. And, I have expressed to us that this is a top priority for them. So it is a national problem.
Mr. Kingsley,
so I will continue. I'm sorry.
That's all right. I have Commissioner Hernandez. You're muted. Jose, you're muted.
I can't hear you.
Commissioner, you're muted.
I hate when that happens. No, I was just apologizing for being late. But a couple quick questions, not that we're asking questions. I know there's always a fine line in terms of what banks are trying to do in consumer protection or awareness. Do you keep track right now in terms of the customer complaints when you hold your checks for too long? I know that that's an issue. I know that you guys have tried to hold checks, but then from the consumer side, they start complaining, saying, why are you holding my check and so forth. Do you keep track of that information?
We do. We obviously keep track of all of our complaints. We spend a lot of time looking through them all. We also, know that complaints are reported to the CFPB, and we get the complaints that go to them and not us, and make sure that we're hearing the same things. If you're asking specifically about held transactions, you are right that when we do hold a transaction, pend a wire, stop a wire in particular, it is incredibly aggravating to customers. Very often they're affluent customers. Very often they're trying to engage in some sort of time-sensitive transaction, trying to buy a house, trying to pay a grandchild's tuition, something like that, and then we don't let it go through. It's a very painful complaint category.
But do you have a correlation in terms of when you do hold something and it does prove to be fraudulent? Do you have something that kind of quasi correlates it?
If you mean, do we have, apart from complaints, are we aware of the holding and then it turns out to be a scam?
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's hard often to put a number around a confirmed scam, because very often the customer will sort of say, fine, I won't send it. And so do you really know, is it a scam or is it not a scam? So sometimes you're trying to prove something that no party has the answer to, but absolutely. A lot of what I spoke of earlier, a lot of our investment has been designed. We're using AI. We have been for quite some time to identify fraudulent and suspicious payments and stop them.
Great, thank you.
Commissioner Beyer has a question for you.
Thank you for what you do, and I appreciate it. What I'd like to focus on is potential solutions, perhaps at the federal or international level. Could you help us understand the difference in regulatory approach between the United States and the rest of the world with respect to consumer protection, particularly in light of the Consumer Finance Commission's demise? And related to that, what tools are other governments using to prevent your prevention that we're not using in the United States? Things like know your customer application to things beyond wire transfers to crypto transfers and ATMs, things like that. In other words, what would a robust national agenda look like to prevent financial scams?
So it's a fairly broad question. I'll try to bring it in a little bit. I have in our letter.
More specific than what?
I have in our letter actually identified some key recommendations for the state of California that would assist us and law enforcement in stopping scammers. I think taking it a level higher, to your point around KYC, is despite what a prior speaker asserted, we do KYC, know your customer, on all of our customers.
Correct.
So anyone who tries to sign up and enter a bank, create a bank account, we do KYC on them. And for some of them, we do periodic KYC. So we go back and relook at it. So that KYC is something that we do. I will note that social media companies and online marketplaces do not. So they have fraudulent sellers going on. Anyone can create an account and sell something or create an investment fund or a great crypto investment scheme. And we will identify those parties when customers complain that they were scammed. We will relay that often to the social media company or the marketplace, and sometimes it never gets taken down. Sometimes it can take a long time. Point being, there are no KYC requirements on anyone who is actually interfacing, who's actually perpetuating the scams through email, through texts, through, again, selling fake goods with Californian customers.
So you could sell gold on Meta without a KYC, know your customer review.
There is no KYC on sellers through social media. And so anyone can create an account. Now, they do take some accounts down, but it's important, I think, to your point, to note that the scam on the elder customers, on all customers of all ages, is happening before they show up at the bank, before they try to make a payment, before they try to withdraw funds. They're already under the spell. They're already in the scam. The scam is happening before it hits the financial institution.
So comment, if you could, on the demise of the Consumer Protection Bureau. Wasn't that designed to deal exactly with this kind of scam behavior and provide both a intake mechanism and a punishment mechanism for bad actors?
The CFPB did pass many regulations, but not really around this. You know, there was nothing that addressed fraud and scams.
But they don't exist anymore.
Nor do they exist. So I think for purposes of this discussion, it doesn't matter.
Okay, I guess what I'm getting at is that there were potential enforcement mechanisms in place that no longer exist.
I'm not familiar with what those enforcement mechanisms are as they pertain to fraud and scams. And again, particularly given that the fact that the scams are happening before they hit the financial system.
Okay, thank you.
The Department of Justice, federal law enforcement, when they engage and when they identify a scammer, assuming they have the resources and the time to do it, they have all the enforcement tools they need to go after the wrongdoers.
Before Commissioner Erner has her hand up, but before I call on her, I do think the point that you're making, that, and I think all of the commissioners keep in mind, there isn't one particular participant here who should bear all of the responsibility for what's going on. Mm-hmm. The banks can't fix it by themselves. So many of us are at the mercy of the social media platforms. I'll briefly relate. I heard an interview on the radio of a woman who was scammed because she had a particular affection for Liam Neeson. She loved Liam Neeson, and she responded to a social media platform that was supposed to be Liam Neeson, and this Liam Neeson needed money from her in order to pay for an airplane ticket so she could get from where she lived to where he was shooting a movie. And she acknowledged that she had gone to multiple pages of Liam Neeson, none of them being the same. And clearly, when you've got a platform that permits that kind of registration of pages that people can access, you can't really expect the financial institutions to unilaterally on their own resolve that problem. Now, you can't point to her and say what's wrong with her, because what we have learned through the course of our hearings is that this is a problem that affects any number of people. Vice Chair Canella's friend was someone who was sophisticated. We had a victim at our first hearing who was a real estate professional. The other one had a degree in chemistry. So these are not unsophisticated rubes, right? Using a cell phone in some far away holler, so to speak, of America. And so there's responsibility for this that needs to be apportioned to everybody along the chain. Mm-hmm. And Commissioner Garcetti started us early on when we took up this topic, that the issue was prevention. Commissioner
Erner. Thank you. And thank you for your testimony so far. So if I understand correctly, there are different kinds of banks. That there are state chartered banks here in California, and then there, I gather, nationally chartered. I'm presuming JPMorgan Chase is a nationally, right? Okay. You happen to be one of my bankers, to be honest with you. So I've had some experience actually personally when someone has tried to rip off my money. Okay. But is there because there's a different jurisdiction regarding state banks, is that an opportunity there that the legislature has something that they can say in regards to what kind of regulatory, requirements we want to put on those state banks because as it's been pointed out at the national level, there will not be an opportunity for quite a while, obviously. And so, but what about the state chartered banks?
Well, I can't speak on behalf of the state chartered banks, and I'm sure the California Bankers Administration would speak on it, but I will make a couple of general observations, and that to my knowledge, I've definitely talked with a number of staff from California and other state chartered banks. They are just as committed to stopping scams and fraud as we are. There's certainly no difference in intent. In fact, sometimes some of the smallest banks with the fewest branches are sometimes I find the most effective because the customers have banked there for 30 years. And so
they know their customers, whatever you guys call that.
Exactly right. So I think talking to them, they share the same point of view that, this is definitely a rapidly growing problem. They feel somewhat powerless to stop, particularly because, again, people are coming in believing that they are in a relationship with Liam Neeson, right? They're under the spell. It is really, really hard. Now that sometimes can be a relatively easy one for if you can get the customer to actually engage in a conversation with you why they're sending the money. Oh, it's Liam Neeson, right? What's harder is that the scammers are very, very good at what they do. And so they will coach the customers to go in. And again, regardless of what kind of size of the bank, they'll coach people to go in. They'll know the kinds of questions the customer can expect to get, and they'll give that customer a very convincing story, right? And even sort of tell them the banker's going to ask you this, the banker's going to ask you that. You have to say it's for your granddaughter, your whatever, you're paying for her wedding. This is how this is what you have to tell them. The customer may still believe they're in love with Liam Neeson, and it's Liam Neeson telling them to do that. But I don't think the regulatory environment really matters there. I do think there are definitely some things, and you'll see them in our letter, that we can specifically recommend to California that would benefit both, I think, national banks and the state chartered banks. So, again, I'm happy to kind of walk through some of those steps, or you can read it in the letter.
Right. Thank you.
Commissioner Byer, and then back to you, Mr. Kingsley. But go ahead, Commissioner.
Yeah, just to clarify a couple of facts. The CF, the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau lost its jurisdiction over non-banks as a result of an action taken by the director of OMB in this year. And second, the Consumer Protection Financial Bureau also engaged in some enforcement action against Zelle and Venmo. So there are options that could have been taken by the Consumer Protection Finance Bureau if it had continued to be funded and exist. So I don't want to leave the impression that they never did anything and that they weren't an option for enforcement.
So I certainly didn't mean to say that they didn't do anything, but their jurisdiction extends over banks, right? Their jurisdiction does not address the root of the problem, which is that the scammers and the fraudsters are outside of the banking system.
With respect, they seem to have jurisdiction over Zelle and Venmo.
Zelle, I would consider part of the banking system.
Okay, and they had jurisdiction over social media companies, which was your point earlier, that they are a source of potential problems. And that authority was taken away by the Trump administration. Is that true?
So it's not my place to listen. I was at the United States Department of the Treasury at the time the CFPB was founded. I have certain personal feelings towards the creation of that agency, but that's not really, I don't think, germane to the conversation here.
Yeah, look, I think in all candor, there are things that are happening on a federal level that are going to be detrimental to consumer protection. I think we all recognize that. I don't know that we have to tombstone it. And what I'd like to hear from Mr. Kingsley is if you could brief, because I know you've got to leave it at a time certain. Can you share with us, for the benefit of those people that are Zooming with us, we've got 74 of them, what you suggest with respect to state remedies.
So I did, thank you. I did outline some state remedies in my letter, but those include making some improvements to reporting elder fraud in California. I think California could really benefit from a unified online reporting platform, streamlining multiple reporting requirements to one online California form report submission, and standardizing a California state process that includes designated points of contact at law enforcement and adult protective services. I think compared to a number of other states, for example, Texas and Louisiana, which have made it much, much easier to report, all combined on one form. We've already seen results working with law enforcement in those states to identify scammers and stop scams. In California, it's very complex. It's very local, often relying on faxes. And there's usually no clear point of contact. So just overall, I think California could do a lot to encourage ongoing communication among banks, APS, and law enforcement. California should also consider adjusting state laws that inhibit financial institutions from reporting elder fraud. And on this, I'm speaking of both national banks as well as your state chartered ones, and inhibit the prosecution of wrongdoers, such as improvements to hold harmless and protective clauses, to state privacy regulations, and additional protections for mandated reporters. Again, I've set this out in a little more detail in my letter. California should also work with law enforcement to review state laws on identity theft and fraudulent impersonation, which we've heard from law enforcement inhibits prosecution of these wrongdoers. California also has a really good opportunity to help keep imposters and scammers from opening accounts at financial institutions in California by allowing commercial entities like Chase to use the American Association of Motor Vehicle Administration's driver license data verification program. It's used in 44 states, but not California. It's been proven effective at keeping many wrongdoers from opening new accounts, and preserves the customer's privacy in doing so. And then I guess taking it up a level, taking it up a higher notch, recognizing kind of the size of California's economy and the fact that it's a state that headquarters some of the largest companies in the world, especially technology companies. California can be a leader among states by establishing a state task force on fraud and scams, leaning into a whole of ecosystem strategy. So not just banks, but again, social media companies and telcos as well, informed by the Aspen Institute's recent United We Stand framework and Australia's new scams prevention framework. I do believe that a California-led task force could help identify emerging fraud and scam activity, provide specialized training and resources to law enforcement, prosecutors, and increase information sharing across sectors, establish key contacts to try to enhance how fast we can take down these scams. It would also assign clear and enforceable responsibilities to telecom, social media, and these tech companies.
Right. Let me, Commissioner Sidley has her hand up.
Yeah, I just have a quick question about data on these scams. Do you know, is it primarily men? Is it women? And do you also know like states? Is it red states, blue states, big states, small states? I mean, what is the data that we've seen?
You mean for the victims or for the scammers
for the victims,
themselves?
For the victims.
So actually a state-by-state breakout is available. I have I think a link in our letter. You've probably seen it. The FBI puts out the IC3 report, and they broke out in that report the numbers by state. California definitely ranks, as you can imagine, very high, even kind of on a relative basis, let alone an absolute basis. In terms of the victims, as I mentioned, it's everybody. It cuts across all demographics. I think it initially started certainly with a lot of focus on elder customers. I'd say if you look at the age ranges of customers, it's what we call barbell shape. So we're now seeing as many young customers getting scammed, often very different scams they tend to fall for. Of course, I would argue it's perhaps not as devastating overall because they still have many years left to, re-earn earnings, and often the amounts are smaller, but still, I think it shakes a lot of, it's embarrassing and it shakes people's faith in, the payment rails and the banking system.
Okay, I'll go back and look at the data. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think, Mr. Kingsley, a big emphasis that I get from your testimony and also from the material that you've provided is the issue of coordination. It really is an issue of coordination. You've got a lot of different players with a lot of information that don't necessarily share, some of which occurs because there are privacy limitations. And if you, again, as Commissioner Sidley earlier said, you try to balance, what it is you're trying to prevent compared to what it takes to operate a business and to keep your customers happy. So you have to strike the balance. And it's important that you've identified in your experience what California can do. It's important, even though we're just the one state. And I agree with Commissioner Byer. Those things that are happening at the federal level are going to be devastating to a number of people. They are not going to be able to have remedies in order to cure their losses. They are going to be lost. They're not going to get support at the federal level that they deserve. And you made an important point early on in your testimony that your conversations with what I would call rank and file in the agencies, they want to do the work. They took those jobs because they wanted to complete the mission, and they're being prevented from doing so. And many of them cannot speak out about how they are being handcuffed because, one, they don't want to get deported, or two, they don't want to get fired. So I think that is a reality. Commissioner Sidley made reference to it. That's a reality that we're confronted with for now. I'm not quite sure how long it's going to go, but you've helped us identify, based on your experience, what it is that you see that California can do to help protect the residents of California. And what we have seen from other information from witnesses is that the harder that you make it for the scammers to engage in business here, they go somewhere else. They're not going to stop necessarily, but what you can do is discourage and deter their increasing their efforts against the people and consumers in California. So that I don't want to put words in your mouth. I'm just telling you what it is that I thought I heard you say.
No, I think that's very accurate. It definitely, I spoke at the Aspen event not too long ago. I really appreciate the approach that they've taken, which is, again, that whole of ecosystem approach. I think there's definitely a lot of people who are outraged, including in federal law enforcement and state law enforcement. There are things that hold them back from getting the information that they need, from prosecuting these wrongdoers quickly enough. There's definitely a lot that can be handled upstream. Why is it that we just continue to get bombarded by, fake texts, scam emails, etc.? So it's very hard, I think, particularly for some of our older and more vulnerable customers to I think know how to deal with all of that.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Kingsley. I see no further raised hands, going once, going twice, sold. All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kingsley. Our next witness today is Kelsey Dean. She serves as the Director of Global Intelligence at Coinbase, which is the leading cryptocurrency exchange, where she focuses on investigating cases involving scams, fraud, and money laundering. She is also a steering committee member for Coinbase's partnership in the Text Against Scams Coalition. Thank you so much for joining us today, Ms. Dean.
Thank you so much for having me. So I have some prepared statements, but I'll also try to address some of the questions that have come up before that I just want to try to weigh in on as well. So thank you so much for including Coinbase in this discussion. Coinbase has over 6.75 million users in California that rely on us to safely purchase, store, and transact with cryptocurrency. My team that I oversee, the Global Intelligence team at Coinbase, is charged with supporting law enforcement's efforts to disrupt these bad actors leveraging cryptocurrency to facilitate their crimes. And scams have been a growing portfolio of our work. My team regularly conducts engagements with law enforcement to support scam fighting efforts. We provide training to local, state, and federal law enforcement on effective seizures of crypto assets, blockchain analysis, and the typology of pig butchering scams in particular. Our typical response time for a subpoena production is under 48 hours, and we take very seriously our responsibility to provide law enforcement with the records and context they need to quickly keep their investigation moving. Moreover, we regularly conduct proactive intelligence gathering sprints with law enforcement agencies globally to identify cryptocurrency wallets associated with scammers, identify common money laundering patterns, and brief law enforcement on opportunities for disruption and seizure. Coinbase has been particularly focused on trying to support law enforcement in asset recovery and tracing of victims' funds lost to scammers. Because cryptocurrency transactions are immutable, funds sent to scammers are generally not recoverable in the way ACH transfers can be clawed back, for example. Nonetheless, the transparent nature of blockchain technology offers valuable tools for tracing illicit activity and coordinating recovery efforts. Most scam-related transfers occur over major networks such as Bitcoin and Ethereum, where transparency of these transactions can be a strength in identifying patterns and pursuing seizures. Law enforcement is frequently able to subpoena the receiving entity of funds to identify the threat actor or related parties responsible for the scam. And sometimes, if traced rapidly enough, this intelligence can also lead to a seizure of the assets. My team and other partners of Coinbase work aggressively to try to recover assets when scammed from victims by conducting blockchain analysis and outreach to the destination. We alert law enforcement when there are potential seizure opportunities. We also offer hold harmless agreements to other exchanges where appropriate to recover scammed or stolen assets. However, an obstacle we have encountered with some cryptocurrency services has been a reluctance to accept these contracts as a mechanism to return the assets. Greater public guidance from the state of California on the use of this legal tool or the establishment of a comparable mechanism would significantly strengthen the ability of Coinbase and other financial institutions to recover lost funds. Many victims report their scam losses to local law enforcement who don't have the blockchain analysis tooling or training needed to identify the destination of the funds. The REACT task force out of Santa Clara County has been notably successful at recovering victims' funds after reported scams. They serve as a potential model similar to San Diego to replicate the level of training and tooling in blockchain analysis and asset recovery. Public education on the warning signs of scams is also critical. When consumers hear repeated messaging regarding red flags, it is more likely to break through. Coinbase provides scam warnings and questionnaires at the time of some sends to attempt to flag indicators of being scammed, such as being told the transaction is to pay taxes on investments or to invest in something promising unrealistically high returns. However, consumer education and warnings in the scam fighting arena are challenging because pig butchering scammers are very good at building trust with their victims and explaining away these warnings. However, if we can raise the volume of these red flags warnings with repetition and more widespread coordination and display, their message can take better hold. Coinbase was a founding member of the Tech Against Scams Coalition alongside Meta, Match Group, and the Ripple Foundation because we recognize the growing need for cross-sector collaboration to combat online fraud. Through the coalition, we've coordinated public awareness initiatives, shared insights on effective consumer education campaigns, and created a monthly intelligence share. These efforts, including a joint summit last year with law enforcement and technology partners, have strengthened our collective understanding of these emerging threats. However, current legal constraints limit the degree of specificity and timeliness with which we can share information about at-risk users. Establishing a clear legal framework for responsible data sharing among trusted entities would enable earlier detection and intervention, ultimately preventing greater consumer harm. For example, if a dating platform identifies users who have engaged with the suspected scammer, that information, shared under appropriate safeguards, could allow financial institutions and cryptocurrency exchanges to deploy proactive warnings or temporary account protections. Similarly, we participate in several other data sharing initiatives focused on illicit cryptocurrency address intelligence and enabling funds recovery, including the Illicit Virtual Asset Network, which was established by the FBI, and TRM's Beacon Chain. These programs would be bolstered by participation from local law enforcement in California, which could be included in training on scam recovery opportunities. In both of these tools, law enforcement can flag stolen and scammed assets so that we get alerted if funds move to our platform and can assist in seizing funds. Enhanced inter-platform coordination, supported by regulatory protections for this data sharing, would create a more unified and effective defense against scams that increasingly span multiple digital ecosystems. And just to address some of the questions that have come up previously, I know there were a lot of questions around reporting of suspicious activity. Coinbase is also regulated by the same FinCEN framework that the gentleman from JPMorgan mentioned earlier. So we file suspicious activity reports on any transactions that we identify. And we recently provided a commentary letter to the Department of Treasury, who was seeking guidance on how to modernize their program. And one of our key recommendations was making better use of the huge repository of data that they have from all of these financial institutions' filings, to essentially extract and make better use of all of these filings. A similar repository is the FBI's IC3 database. When a victim informs us that they've been scammed, we frequently recommend that they file with the IC3 so that the FBI is collecting those identifiers of compromise. And that means that they have a large repository of identifiers around scam perpetrators. And finding ways to share this data to prevent further harm would be a very high impact data sharing initiative. And yeah, just to reiterate a number of the points and themes that have come up today is that I think coordination and viewing this as a holistic problem that has disruption opportunities earlier up the pipeline before a scammer has even engaged with a user is really critical. I'll pause for comments and questions.
Let me turn to the commissioners.
I have I'm sorry, David, go ahead.
Yeah, Commissioner Byer, then Sid.
Sure. Well, thank you for your testimony and its comprehensive nature. I want to focus on the legal changes that you referenced. It's my understanding that there's a bill pending in the Congress to alter the regulation of cryptocurrency. Does that bill include changes of the kind you're describing to facilitate data sharing across applications, for example, between crypto companies and dating apps, or between social media companies and the Treasury? And specifically, is there any change afoot that would require cryptocurrency companies to engage in something like or the Know Your Customer rule?
So to clarify, we do conduct KYC on all of our customers, and we have for many years. And any centralized cryptocurrency exchange regulated in the US has to also do this. So that's already in place. In regard to your first question, the bills currently under discussion and approval don't address the type of broad data sharing that I'm referring to, because it wouldn't just be limited to cryptocurrency exchanges. What I'm referring to is setting up a data sharing framework that is inclusive of technology companies, of traditional banking sector, of law enforcement, something similar to what's in place with 314B protections, where financial institutions have an ability to share and request information on specific customers when there's concerns around money laundering, which we do also engage in that network. We send requests to banks when we think that there's a potential suspicious activity on an account or high-risk user. But right now it's not, the protections of that clause are purely for counter-terror financing and money laundering. They don't explicitly cover protecting scam victims, and they're not meant to operate at scale. They're typically a manual process for individual accounts. And they also do not include technology companies. And so there's potential indicators, as I mentioned, of a user having engaged with a scammer account or other indications that they're in the pipeline of a scam that we would like to be notified of, that could help us protect our users. But that requires coordination across multiple sectors, not just the financial sector and not just the cryptocurrency industry.
Thank you. To pick up on Commissioner Sidley's point about, and Chair Nava, coordination and data collection, what you're really talking about is the potential victims are going to enter into this scam scheme like fish going into a net. And what you're describing is the net is pretty taut for banks, and maybe to a lesser extent, but to some substantial extent, a cryptocurrency, but it's not at all regulated appropriately in terms of data sharing with respect to social media, dating apps, and other potential entrance points for the victims. Is that a fair summary?
Yes, I think that's a good summary. Is there's no structure in place to help facilitate data sharing between the different potential lifestyle or life cycle developments of a scam victim.
And in your estimate, will it get worse as more and more artificial intelligence manipulates the psychological insights from massive, massive amounts of data about either phenotypes, that is, people age 50 and over who are single or who are disabled or under 21 and single, whatever, and particular scripting of AI, chatbots, et cetera. So this is going to get much more pronounced in the future unless something happens. Is that right?
I absolutely agree. And I wanted to address your prior question around how AI might be enabling a lot of these scams, because we definitely have seen it used in many of the tooling development needed to deploy these scams. In terms of the scripts that the scammers use, like you said, that it could be used to make the scripts even more customized to each individual. It's used in developing fake profiles that are set up on social media and dating platforms. Increasingly, we're concerned about how deep fake videos could be generated from simply images of loved ones. So I know that you guys have probably heard reports of scammers claiming to be a loved one's granddaughter or grandson and emulate their voice over a phone call. That could evolve to be even more insidious with deep fake videos of a loved one. And so I think it's really critical that part of the solution here is a discussion around how AI generated content monitors who's using its tools, but also there is going to be a reality where developers outside of US regulation are developing these tools as well. And there will always be some bad actors with access to these type of tools. So I think on the defensive side, there also needs to be tooling available to Californians to help identify when something is AI generated, even if we don't have control over regulating who generated that content.
That's very helpful. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Sidley.
So my question is data driven, and currently, what percentage of your transactions are you seeing that are tied to fraud?
To be honest, I don't know the exact number. I know that Chainalysis, which is a blockchain analysis research firm that regularly publishes data studies on kind of the extent of illicit activity in the crypto industry, has estimated that less than 1% of all transactions are associated with illicit activity.
Do you think that possibly that's due to the fact that many of your users, not most, but many, are actually younger? I mean, seniors don't necessarily at this point understand crypto, haven't tapped into crypto. So it's a different type of fraud. It's a different type of victim.
Yes, I do think that's true. Our users do tend to skew younger because there is there's a greater level of comfort and familiarity with crypto and just comfort with risk with novel financial instruments.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That's it. Thank you very much. I appreciate your testimony very much.
Thank you. Ms. Dean, do you have anything else? Because I'm looking at the commissioners and I see no raised hands.
No, that's it for my
Okay.
comments.
Great. I want to thank you so much for taking the time to participate. Appreciate
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Dean. Commissioners, our last witness for today is Josh Bercu. He's the Executive Director of the Industry Traceback Group, where he leads an effort to identify the source and ultimately stop illegal phone calls. He also serves as Senior Vice President of Policy and Advocacy at USTelecom, which is the Broadband Association. Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Bercu.
Thank you, Chair Nava and commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to testify on this critical issue. Continued partnership between the government and industry is vital to sustain the vigilance, innovation, and coordination we need in this fight against the scammers and the fraudsters that are exploiting Californians and individuals all across the country. So I'm Josh Bercu, Executive Director of the Industry Traceback Group, or ITG, and Senior Vice President at USTelecom, the Broadband Association. For 10 years now, USTelecom has led the ITG, which serves in an official role designated by the Federal Communications Commission to lead private traceback efforts of suspected unlawful robocalls. We have made meaningful progress in our fight against illegal robocalls, and that's really where our fight against scams started, including both scam robocalls, but also illegal telemarketing that are more in the nuisance category. We've deployed tools like call blocking and labeling, stir, shake, and call authentication, and Traceback, the effort we run, which have all been complemented by the FCC's KYC and accountability framework and aggressive federal and state enforcement over the last decade. So with regard to Traceback, that's one of the tools we use to investigate and disrupt call-based scammed operations. We rapidly trace the path of an illegal call. No carrier knows exactly where it came from. The way the phone network works, it may come multiple hops. So we trace that back and identify who are the actors behind the call, enabling or originating that fraud. In our time doing this, we've contributed to enforcement action, dozens of enforcement actions by federal agencies, by state AGs, and we know this works. So just to give you some examples, there were raids of illegal call centers in India based on finding out who they were. And overnight, there was about an 85% drop in robocalls that were impersonating the IRS in 2016. And you may have one time got in a robocall about an auto warranty. Those are virtually gone because of the combo of our work and then the FCC and state AGs going very aggressive against those. So we've seen that improvement on many of the high volume scam calls. We see they still happen, but they're at much lower levels than they once were, about 40% lower than their original peak. And I think there's good data that we've seen. Californians have seen this difference. So FTC data shows that do not call complaints about robocalls to the FTC are down 67%. Just to be clear, there's too many illegal robocalls, and the more sophisticated targeted schemes that we've heard about today have led to rising loss to fraud and more upended lives each day. So there's plenty of work left to do. They're no longer blasting these millions and billions of calls impersonating Social Security. There's some of that, but a lot of the worst of the worst has shifted to more targeted, more sophisticated schemes with a live call, knowing that customers bank, and finely tuned deception. But there is some good news here. We're not powerless against these scams. So for instance, our work that we do with Traceback, it used to take several months, 4 to 6 months to get the data we're getting in a day or two. And we're getting it at scales that the enforcement community wasn't able to do. And we're sometimes even getting it in hours. But to be absolutely clear, and I would really want to make this one of my top level points here, is there is just no substitute for aggressive criminal enforcement against the criminals behind these scams. Give you an example. Last week, the Department of Justice announced a seizure of about $15 billion in Bitcoin that were tied to alleged forced labor scam compounds that were discussed before. There's just no industry action that could have the same order and magnitude of impact as seizing $15 billion from the criminals and hopefully getting that money back to the victims. So what can a state like California do in this fight against the industrial level transnational crime we're fighting against? I'll go back to where I started and what you've heard from others today, and that's really looking for partnership. That's how we build our Traceback effort. It's built on partnership across the industry with law enforcement and increasingly across different sectors. Our work is support enforcement action by a bipartisan coalition of 49 state attorneys general, including California. And we stand ready to continue to partner with California and law enforcement officials across the country to find the criminals behind the scams and hold them accountable. I think we also need more of that partnership across the states and with the federal government. Fragmentation is not the way to solve this problem. I think I agree with some of the earlier comments that we need a whole of ecosystem, whole of government, whole solutions to this. So I think there's room for California to help lead in that collaboration and coordination. And lastly, the state of California also can encourage more partnership across the industry. This came up from some of the other witnesses too, but whether it's a safe harbor or other ways to unlock more information sharing across companies and sectors, that's something I think it would be very welcome, because without legal clarity, some state laws, such as privacy laws, can be an inhibitor of sharing some of the information we can use to prevent scams. Thank you. I look forward to your questions.
Yeah, let me, Commissioner Hernandez had his hand up earlier. I don't know if, there he goes. Let's back up and then I'll go to Garcetti.
Thank you for being here. Quick question in terms of texting. I mean, this information in terms of the calls, do you have similar data on the texting and similar oversight in terms of text messages?
So our industry traceback effort, traceback group effort, has historically been on the call side part because it was stood up for the robocalls. There is a lot of work that's been done over the last couple of years and continues to be done on the texting side. A different organization that we work closely with, the CTIA, the Wireless Association, launched a secure messaging initiative. They are packaging referrals to law enforcement and doing some other measures. So there's a lot of work being done underway in that space as well.
And a related question, I remember, at least in California, 25 years ago, there was the whole do not call list. And I mean, is there something similar being looked at in terms of this discussion?
Yeah, so the do not call list is very important to our work. The federal list, the state list, it's very important, but the real bad guys don't care, right? So that's the challenge, is the ones behind it, they'll ignore it. We'll use it as evidence for why we feel comfortable tracing a call that's hitting numbers on the do not call list. So in that way we use it. But when we're talking about scam centers abroad, they could care less about civil liability for ignoring, laws designed for telemarketing, and that's part of the challenge.
Thank you.
Commissioner Garcetti.
Thank you. I believe what you're indicating is really that you believe that prosecution and possible, criminal penalties involved is the best way to help prevent these crimes. Is that correct?
So to be clear, I'm an all of the above person. The industry, yeah.
There may be all of the above, but you listed the partnership with other law enforcement agencies. All right, amplify what you're talking about when you say partnerships. Where is that going to lead?
Yeah, so I mean, I think the example of the DOJ seizing the $15 billion in Bitcoin is an example.
We're state focused.
Sure. Well, I think the work being done in the San Diego example is a good example of that type of partnerships, that type of building. Some of the effort, I think that can feed up. We work very closely with state AGs. I think making sure that the states partner well with the federal agencies is really important here. where I come to the why criminal. So, we built a lot of protections over the years to make this harder, and it has made it harder. There is more friction today than there was to make illegal calls 15 years ago, substantially more. But where the conversation started with the first witness, what you saw in California is it made it harder to do deposits in cryptocurrency. You see the gold bars. We've seen the same thing in our sector. Every new protection we put in, we see the workaround, and now we're building and working towards that. The only thing that stops the workarounds is holding the actual bad actors accountable and finding them. So that's still, to me, the gold standard, silver bullet here.
But the bad actor is the question. Sure, we can arrest the courier who picks up the gold or whatever it is and hope that we can twist them somehow to maybe name someone higher. And we're told, I don't know, I was told to pick this up and deliver at this location. That's all I have. And if you don't have anything to disprove that, that's it. You don't go any higher. So my question still remains is, this is what you list, number one, on your list of all the things to be doing, is more partnerships with law enforcement agencies. And frankly, I don't see where that is going to prevent this kind of crime.
Well, so I do think enforcement seizures prevent the next one. It's not preventing the first one, but it can prevent the next one. And I'll give you an example that I do think could be something that, California and local law enforcement explore. The investments we've done in our space in the calling side have made it a lot harder for bad actors to sit abroad, use VoIP providers from abroad, and get those calls to Americans. They still do, but not at the scale they used to. So one of the advents we've seen, which is also relevant for the tech side, is the SIM farms located in the United States that someone buys a bunch of prepaid SIMs, loads it up into SIM farms to generate. So someone abroad can generate those calls inside. To the carriers, that's a local call that looks like you and me calling, right? Or a text message.
Yes.
And sometimes they're not even text. But there is someone operating, managing that SIM farm in the United States. And the carriers can help. If we find law enforcement that are interested, they have data that can help find that place, raid that SIM farm, take it down. And, I take your point. Going from there to successful prosecution is a lot of steps with a lot of potential failures along the way. But even if we can figure out ways to take those down quickly, seize the assets, raise the cost of business to the scammers, disrupt them more quickly, that is still, in my mind, very impactful.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Very good. Looking at the other commissioners, do you have anything else that you'd like to add, sir?
No, I think I hit the main ones. I think there's a lot of great discussion, including, I'll just comment on the AI. I thought the person from Coinbase made a really good point, which is, the way we're looking at AI and think about AI is one, there is no AI exception in law. So if you violate the law with AI, you're still violating the law, even if you use AI, which is a favorite line of some of our federal enforcement friends that I've stolen from them. But beyond that, I think there is real risk on AI increasing the quality of the scams. Some of the tools we have, if it's increasing the scale of the scam, work well. It's easier for a carrier to see blasts of heavy activity of calling versus very targeted narrow. So if that's the worry, there's actually some good tools for that. But I think what the Coinbase witness said is also right, is we already know on the black market, there's LLMs that have all the protections that the US ones have turned off and that are designed to enable scams. So there is going to be an ongoing challenge there.
All right. Appreciate your comments. Seeing no further questions from the commissioners. Thank you, sir, for taking the time to contribute to our conversation.
Of course. Thank you for allowing me.
So I'm looking at I think we've successfully heard from the scheduled witnesses, which would lead us into the public comment portion of the meeting. Ethan.
Correct, Mr. Chairman. So we will now move to item number 2 on the agenda, public comment. For members of the public, this is the time to make comment on any issue, including the financial scams hearing, the selection of future topics we're going to discuss shortly, or anything else. For those wishing to make public comment, please use the raised hand function in Zoom. If you have phoned into the meeting, email us immediately at littlehoover@lhc.ca.gov. littlehoover@lhc.ca.gov. Give us your phone number so we know who to unmute. Public comment is limited to 3 minutes per speaker. Commissioners will be able to hear you but not see you, and total public comment is limited to 3 minutes. And again, if you have Zoomed in, use the raised hand function. That is by far most preferable. We have no one in the physical site wishing to make public comments, so I'll ask Shara to identify anyone online.
Our first public comment will be Chris Schultz. You now have the ability to unmute yourself.
Good afternoon. It's Chris Schultz with the California Bankers Association. Can everyone hear me all right?
We can.
Yes, we can.
Excellent. Thanks so much. We represent banks of all sizes and help power communities and the economy. We deeply appreciate the Commission's leadership in examining how the state can better prevent and respond to these financial scams. We absolutely agree that no single actor or sector can solve it alone. Banks are committed partners in this fight. As was testified to earlier by our friend from JPMorgan Chase, banks invest heavily in fraud detection, customer education, mandatory reporting, but banks also must respect each customer's right to access and control their own funds, and banks can't simply block an authorized transaction based on suspicion. I did want to address Commissioner Ehrener's question, and it's good to see you, Commissioner Ehrener, about hypothetical law that applies only to state chartered banks. I think it's important to note that federally chartered banks hold the overwhelming majority of customer deposits that the Commission is worried about. It's a market share issue. Passing a law that applied only to state chartered banks wouldn't protect most of the consumers we're worried about here. Further, we're seeing mergers and consolidations in this space, and every consolidation in recent memory, they're electing a federal charter. We observe that banks are observing California kind of ramping up obligations on state charter banks that don't apply to their federally chartered competitors, and it's one more reason to choose a federal charter. I don't speak for credit unions, but the exact same dynamic is going on in the credit union industry, mergers, consolidations, conversions to federal charters. It has a new law that applied only to state chartered banks or credit unions would have the same effect. Real progress requires a whole of ecosystem approach. As we've heard multiple times, this typically begins outside the banking system. Telcos and technology companies should play a far greater role in blocking these scams before victims ever reach the point of payment. Platforms should be required to verify advertisers and remove fraudulent investment schemes and share information about verified scams. Telecom should do a better job authenticating caller IDs and stop the billions of spoofed calls and texts that lure victims into transferring funds. We absolutely agree that Adult Protective Services and the Department of Justice need additional authority and resources to intervene quickly when red flags are reported. We do think that California has an opportunity to lead the nation, unite banks, tech, telecom, law enforcement, share fraud intelligence, disrupt these scams in real time, and measure success by prevention rather than reimbursement. We urge the Commission to champion this coordinated model. Thank you for your time, and thank you for including the banking industry's perspective in this important work.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Scott Perello. You now have the ability to unmute yourself.
Thank you, everybody. My name is Scott Perello, and I'm a Deputy District Attorney here in San Diego. I was fortunate enough to be invited to testify in Sacramento at the September 25th hearing, and I've enjoyed listening today, and thank the commissioners for your commitment to this issue. I just in listening to some of the speakers, I just wanted to remind everybody the challenges in light of the Commissioner Garcetti's exchange with the last speaker, that we are not going to be able to arrest and prosecute our way out of this problem. And I think we all need to recommit ourselves to this whole of society approach and understand that we are losing this fight. There's no question about it. Everyone is so well intended and working so hard to stop this program, this problem, but we're losing. We're really getting our butts kicked, to put it bluntly. When you look at the IC3 report alone from last year, there were 800,000 complaints in 2024. 300,000 people reported losing money. That's just a fraction of the cases, only people that reported it to the FBI. So we're talking in the millions here of Americans, probably a million Californians who are being scammed each year. So despite what everyone is doing, I think we all need to pause and reframe how we're looking at this, and do it with urgency because of the amount of cases. On September 25th, I mentioned during my testimony that everyone's pointing to San Diego, and we are so proud of leading in this fight. But despite our best efforts and our collaboration and partnerships, we are working less than 1% of the cases in San Diego that are being reported. So we all have our finger on the collective dam here, and none of us should be patting ourselves on the backs on doing a job well done, because there's still every single day, probably hundreds of Californians every single day that are in the process of being scammed. And we all really need to rededicate ourselves to looking at solutions that we're not currently doing. And I do agree with Commissioner Garcetti that we really should be investing in looking at how to stop the scams themselves. And to echo what the Chase Bank witness said, that we need to stop these scammers from getting to us so easily, because once they're under the trance and once they've been scammed, and then especially once the money's gone, there really is very little that can be done despite partnerships and collaboration. So thank you again for your time, and thank you everyone for your dedication to this cause.
Thank you, Mr. Perello. I believe we have no other hands raised, and I'm told, Mr. Chairman, we have no emails. So I believe we can close item 2, public comment, and move into item 3, which is the project and meeting schedule. If I may, I'll take these slightly out of order. Item 3B is the future meeting schedule. As I mentioned to commissioners in an email, after surveying all of you, it seems that sticking with the 4th Thursday of the month is likely to produce the best attendance. And so the 2026 schedule in your packet for this meeting has the dates for the meeting on the 4th Thursday of each month in 2026. Turning to item 3A is the update on current studies. We are formatting the electricity report and hope to release it very shortly. We are drafting the report on contracting with nonprofits. We hope to bring the draft to the full commission next month. Obviously, today we're holding the second hearing on financial scams. We're now planning hearings for November and December on data centers and the electricity grid, the study that was approved at the last meeting. Pardon me. And we are planning an implementation review hearing for January regarding our work on the developmental disabilities system. That's a topic raised at the last meeting by Commissioner Sidley. For various staffing reasons, I think it is best that we delay until the spring the hearings on IT management projects in state government. So we'll start that study previously approved in the spring. That leads me to item C3, which is future study topics. I believe that even with all of the activity I just outlined, we have bandwidth for the commission to select one additional study topic at this time, with hearings likely to be held in the new year. You could either pick a topic now, or of course we can return next month with scoping memos on 2 or 3 potential topics. I'm cognizant of Commissioner Byers' request that we cull the list of potential studies. We will do so. We haven't had time to do that yet, and so the material in your packet is essentially the same as it was last month. That includes 3 new project requests we received recently. Page 37 is a letter from Assemblymember Blanca Pacheco and other stakeholders regarding student debt. Page 40 is a letter from family groups regarding the licensing of residential care facilities. Page 43 is a letter regarding CalPERS PPO plans. Your packet also includes the previously written scoping memos on youth suicide and education in state prisons. And then beginning at page 32 is the list of various ideas proposed over time. So again, you can all pick one of those or something else. You're not limited to that list, or we can return with scoping memos in November. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll turn it back to you for whatever discussion the commission wishes.
All right, let's turn it over to the commissioners. Any expression of preference at today's meeting with respect to any future projects? Commissioner Byer. You're muted, David.
Commissioner, you're muted there.
Yeah, thinking about the schedule, a new governor will take office in 2026. There'll be an election in 2026, sorry. And one of the things that I think we could usefully do is focus on an agenda for the next governor on questions of affordability. And I tried to look at sort of the spectrum of issues we've taken up that speak to affordability. And so we have already undertaken insurance, homeowners insurance, and electricity. We've done 2 studies in the last 4 years on housing, but we have not done anything on higher education and student debt. And that one seems to match up with a legislative request. And so to me, that has the strongest matchup, if you will, particularly in light of evolving financial pressures on all levels of higher education, from community college to the state university, to the UC system, to private. They're all facing new and different challenges, and students are facing increased pressure on student debt in ways that were not true even a year ago. So that, to me, sort of leapt off the page.
Student debt is up. Hernandez.
I had a process question in terms of the legislature and their ability to send over requests. Is there a particular time that they do this? I'm assuming when they're in session. Have we seen kind of when that usually happens? Is it, I mean, and then conversely, should we set up deadlines? I know that, for example, the Joint Legislative Audit Committee, there are certain deadlines. You have to get your letters in before, if we want to consider it for a specific amount of time. I mean, right now, it seems like they just send it whenever they send it. So does it make sense for us to have a better process? Because I know already in talking to a couple of members, they have lots of ideas for us. But I mean, I don't know if I should tell them, we'll get them in by X, or we won't consider them.
Correct, Commissioner Hernandez. To answer your question, there is no set schedule right now. We receive those letters whenever legislative offices or sometimes stakeholder groups go to legislative offices and request those letters. The commission is certainly free to create a more set schedule. We could come back in November with a proposal for doing that if that meets if that's what the commission wishes. That's really up to the commission. By law, you all set your own agenda, where we take requests from the legislature and anyone else. But certainly happy to return with a proposal for a set schedule if that's what the commission wishes. But right now we don't have that.
I saw some vigorous head shaking by Commissioner Aaroner.
Right. Thank you. The problem there, I think, but the part of the problem is, though, is that we never know on our for our own schedule when we're going to have an opening for another, for another project. And so to give them a final time, which means they could wait for 1 month, because maybe there's an opening in 1 month, but there might not be an opening for the 7th or until the 7th or 8th month, and something else has come in or whatever. And so I think it's really hard to give them to give them scheduled deadlines. I just do. I appreciate the Auditor General. Part of the reason they have time frames is because their only job is not to respond to the legislature. That is only half their job, right? Because the other half of their job is actually they need to do auditing of state agencies. And so they only have so many hours to respond to the legislature. And so they have a time frame there so that they can plan. But it's hard for us to plan, because if we have an opening right now, we're talking about it. But next month we might not have an opening, or all of a sudden our staffing arrangements changes, that kind of thing. And our capacity either goes up or down. So I just don't know how you do it. I appreciate the idea, but I don't know how you do it.
Okay. Any other suggestions with respect to, because right now what we're looking at is the issue of student debt. And I think that we had the question was raised by a community organization that I think later made contact with the legislator and were able to get support for the idea. And it strikes me, if you look at what Commissioner Byer has said in terms of the development of a theme, then the issue of student debt is one that is significant. So unless somebody says hell no, looks to me now that's the direction staff should go. There's Hernandez.
I guess, the question is, what about student debt? What is within the purview of California? I'm guessing it will study the rising costs of higher ed, or Ethan?
The letter requests a focus on so-called institutional debt, meaning debt owed to the university, and that is certainly within the purview of California. You're correct that like federal student debt is not within the state's purview. There's nothing that would stop the commission from expanding, going off of the legislative request letter, but expanding that to include, say, the cost of higher education. If it is helpful, we could come back in November with a scoping memo on that topic that examines both the specific request in the letter and potential expansions to that study. The letter itself references institutional debt. If that answers your question, Commissioner.
Yes, thank you.
So it sounds like a scoping memo would be helpful. So it looks to me as like we're all okay going in that direction. Okay. Anything else?
Very good then. No, Mr. Chairman, we will return at the November meeting with a scoping memo that plays off of that legislative request letter. No, in that case,
if I could just add, it may make no sense ultimately for this study, but something to kind of think about also in that scoping memo is just the budgeting process from the legislature about how they fund Cal State and UCs, and then also the effort maybe for Cal State and UCs to fundraise on their own, and whether or not we can call attention to that. Obviously the state has less money and has been giving less money. As an alum of Cal, which you all know I am because I talk about it all the time, they're not as good about raising money. When I went to Cal, the state paid for it, so nobody asked me. They're trying to get there, but they're not doing, that's certainly not like Stanford or USC, where as soon as you're born, somebody's asking for money, whether you go to school there or not. So just another sort of aspect on what this study could be is how can more money be generated or something like that. So thanks. Sorry. Go ahead.
Maybe on the same line, I know that the baby bonds came out. There are a couple of programs that were created to help offset costs. Could we do maybe on how that's working in terms of, they just were passed, so they're probably like 6 years old now, not babies, but still in terms of how much money has been raised, how can potentially offset some of the costs. I think, yes, expanding some of the study to look at some of the available resources might be good.
Including the 529 accounts, right, that are federally established, but lots of families have. But I don't, in the point about looking at state schools, I really also would like to include community colleges, because they're funded through 98, okay, but they serve more students than anybybody else.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I think we need to look at that in the report as well.
That one, didn't we have in essence, free community college for some full-time students? Do we want to show kind of who it's serving? Is it serving?
And whether or not, because if we're going to attach this as Commissioner Byer is looking at in regards to student loans and all of that, right? What is the load that they're carrying after they leave that 2-year institution, right? And or as they move to the 4-year institution. So I just think because that's where not the majority, but they have the most students, right? And the age group is a very interesting issue there, because they have older students also. Yep. It would be I'd be interested to know what their load is as they leave a community college, right? And their capacity to be able to pay off that loan.
And then, Ethan, you may find out from our scoping memo that we've now put too much stuff on this poor stuff. We've overwhelmed it.
Exactly. And anything else but the kitchen sink. Right.
Just putting that out.
We will return, Commissioner Sidley, with a scoping memo that outlines potential options and various components that you could or could not choose to include.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Perfect. All right.
Very good. In that case, Mr. Chairman, we have concluded the agenda for today. The next meeting is November 20th. That will be the first hearing on data centers and the electricity grid.
Yeah, and on the data centers, I shared a news story with staff and also the two commissioners that are working on that. There apparently are some places in the country where they can't rely on your local energy source, and so they repurpose jet engines, if you can imagine. Wow. They take a jet engine and bolt it into a frame, yeah, and operate it so that it creates power for the AI center. What a deal.
It's a high-tech hamster wheel.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great. All right, everybody. It was a pleasure to see you all again. Appreciate your contribution to this. And I'm hoping that the money I spent for this new mic is actually worth it. Anyway, thanks, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.